Hey, so what's going on here in Idaho, Oregon with pot, weed, marijuana, the devil's parsley, or whatever it's called? Let's talk about that next. Hey, everybody. Dave Edwards, Treasure Valley Dave here, and I was going through the news recently, and I came across this story that got me thinking and asking questions, and I thought you might have some of the same questions, and it's about what's going on with marijuana in Oregon, Idaho, and that whole relationship there.
Hey, man, open up!
Who is it?
It's Dave, man, open up!
Dave?
Dave, yeah.
Dave's not here.
So let's just get right to it. So I was reading this story about the state line pot shop's latest flashpoint in the Idaho-Oregon border debate. Well, okay, and there's some things about this that might have an impact. Certainly it's worth asking questions about. So there's Stephen Meelan, and he opened up a dispensary in Oregon, in Ontario. So Ontario, keep this in mind, is a population of 11,600. And Boise is in Idaho, where marijuana of all kinds, including medical marijuana, is illegal. So, I don't know what your position on marijuana is, or should you even have a position? I'm not sure, but that's not what we're talking about here. So Stephen's business is Hot Box Farms, and he's talking about how since Ontario, there are now, since 2018, there are now 12 dispensaries in this small farming town, more than anywhere else in the state. And like I said, they have 12. That's going to be 14 here in a minute, and we'll see that. Ontario now sells more pot per capita than anywhere else in Oregon. So keep that in mind. And they're right there on the border from Idaho, right across the bridge. This boom has quickly become the latest flashpoint in a larger political and cultural battle. And Oregonians, the conservative ones over in the rural parts, they want to join Idaho because apparently they want to get away from the weed. And for those of you that tune into Kevin Miller's show in the morning, he talks about this quite a bit too. You might you might enjoy listening to him once in a while. And if you're not in the area, you can listen to him on his app. Just do some searching and you'll find it. Kevin Miller, KIDO, Talk Radio. How Greater Idaho took shape. We did a video recently on Greater Idaho. Make sure you go take a look for that. But in addition to that, as far as this story goes, today Portland looms large in a more recent push to create this Greater Idaho. That seems a little counterintuitive. Maybe, because, Portland is the big liberal bastion, right? Some in sparsely populated eastern Oregon say they feel so divorced from the politics of the liberal city and the West Coast that they're asking for an actual divorce. They want to leave Oregon and become part of Idaho. So Representative Barbara Earhart, she's a Republican from Idaho, and she recently put forward legislation, a bill that would authorize Idaho to continue talks with Oregon about moving forward on the Greater Idaho Project. And she said, we have a little bit of a drug problem right on the side of our border. And continuing, she said, a lot of Idahoans are going there to Ontario to get drugs, and that will be pushed hundreds of miles away if this Greater Idaho thing happens. So is having readily accessible drugs pushed hours away, is that a good thing or a bad thing for us in Idaho? That's a question for you to ask and answer yourself. By contrast, Oregon voters recently decriminalized small amounts of hard drugs like cocaine and heroin and approved tighter gun laws. So Oregon voters, that's probably the main populace of voters because that's how votes work, right? And those would be the more liberal ones over on the western side. And that probably doesn't represent the more conservative Oregonians over here on the eastern side. But they're still going to be just as impacted by it. So heroin, cocaine, all legal, and tighter gun laws, which means that you can't protect yourself from, drugged up people looking to do stuff. Many small farming and ranching communities have been hit hard by addiction. Yeah, so not just the crime, but the addiction. So, and I have heard somebody say this before. It's like, yeah, if you want to do marijuana, do drugs, whatever, make sure that, you become successful first and then, do whatever you want. But if you try to do it the other way around, if you become, addicted to these drugs before you become successful, you'll never become successful. And I'm sure that there's exceptions to that, but I have seen that firsthand where just getting on things that alter your mind and, wreck your brain will not necessarily lead to a good conclusion. The partisanship has grown and just the cultures have grown apart, said an Oregon resident and the spokesman for the Citizens for Greater Idaho. They've got a good website too. And, the cultures have grown apart. And it's not really just partisanship anymore. Partisanship was probably something that we saw in the 70s and 80s, but now it's this culture thing. It really is a whole different culture. And the cultures may end up clashing. And we hear people talk about the Second Civil War, which, by the way, was an HBO movie that came out in 1997 that talks about Idaho going to civil war with the federal government. If you haven't checked it out, might be hard to find, but it's certainly worth checking it out. The Second Civil War. Anyway, so over here in the county where Ontario is, this is the county commissioner, Ron Jacobs, and he said that we just feel like our conservative values are different than theirs, meaning the lawmakers over in the liberal part of the state. They pass so many laws over there that they don't even take us into consideration. We're kind of a stepchild over here in Eastern Oregon. Yep, I've heard that quite often. While Idaho entrepreneurs are keen on crossing the Snake River over into Oregon to start a marijuana business, this county commissioner Jacobs sees a trend going on in the other direction. He said farmers and ranchers are increasingly looking to relocate some or all of their businesses in Idaho. So, well, that's good. Why? Well, they're producers. They want to go out and be productive citizens and make things and sell things. And those people at the 14 pot shops in Ontario, they want to sell pot. And that's about it. Stephen, that we talked about earlier, the owner of the Hot Box in Ontario, he said that this may actually backfire and end up building more support for legalizing marijuana in Idaho. Do you think this really will happen? I'm sure he hopes. Well, maybe he hopes so. Maybe business is good the way it is. But he also goes on to say, remember that Ontario was conservative right-wing Ontario just a couple years ago as well. And so maybe he swerved into the truth there. It's like, so Ontario was conservative right-wing according to this guy. And now the marijuana is legal, brought in by the lefties over in the state legislature, over in the left liberal part of the Oregon. And so now it's really kind of corrupted the conservative right-wing Ontario that it used to be. And only in a, quote, this guy just a couple of years. So could that be what would happen in Idaho if Idaho legalized marijuana? And in Ontario, anyway, marijuana is starting to look pretty mainstream. How many people have you heard that go to Colorado, Oregon, and it's just stinky? You go downtown and it's just stinky. And there are 2 more dispensaries set to open, bringing the total just in little Ontario, 11,000 people, up to 14. Wow. So what do you think? Do you think moving to Boise is going to be a good idea because you can only just drive an hour and get your pot, and that's convenient? Are you happy that you could be here in the Boise area and, your kids aren't subject to seeing what comes from all this? Like the legalization of harder drugs, heroin, cocaine, and all the other things that, once you become so apathetic, and we see it in Portland, Seattle, San Francisco, it just becomes a circus on the streets and not in a fun way. So that's what's going on. Maybe this Greater Idaho project would push marijuana even further away from, the bulk of the population of Idaho right here in, the Treasure Valley. Maybe that's a good thing. But I know one thing, though, if you're going to vote on it, you're going to have to be up here and not where you are right now in, Washington or California or Phoenix or Texas or Colorado. Anyway, the point being is you need to come check us out. See what you think. It's pretty nice up here. I can't deny that. Well, so make sure if you like this video and you know somebody needs to see it, please share it. Couple thumbs up would be very helpful. And also subscribe to the channel. That means so much to us. Well, that's Treasure Valley Dave. And, as always, I'm looking forward to helping you get home.